Welcome to another episode of the Untangling Web3 podcast. Jack, I want you to cast your mind back to 2021. Do you remember when Mark Zuckerberg rebranded what was Facebook at the time to Meta? And everyone was like, wow, this is going to be a whole new era of metaverse technology. And then their stocks completely tanked because no one really knew what it meant or how anyone was going to get any real business value from it. Well, yeah, Zuckerberg kind of appeared to step down from operations at the time, maybe did a bit of a 180. But we're actually going to discuss today what's really going on at Meta because it's 3 years later. And it seems like Meta is still pushing a lot of this technology through. We've got the Ray-Ban smart glasses to discuss, and we've got the very recently announced Orion AR glasses to announce as well. So is the metaverse still kicking or just hanging on by a thread? Let's get into it.
Yeah, I have cast my mind back, and I seem to remember some pretty hokey uh, keynotes and things hosted in a very beta version of his new metaverse, right? The Horizons platform obviously came out, and it's been going for a few years, and I think it's had pretty bad reception overall. I would say. I mean, a lot of people have been using Facebook or Meta now as a way to gauge the general performance and the whether or not the idea of the metaverse is in the zeitgeist, right? So when they came out with the rebrand in 2021, everyone was super bullish on metaverse. And then over time, as you said, with the share price drop and the kind of lack of interest or the lack of active users of things like Horizon Worlds, that kind of dropped off a lot. And I think this time last year, people were kind of saying, well, the metaverse is a little bit dead, or at least for now, we're not going to see anything anytime soon. But yeah, this new announcement about the Orion glasses has definitely caught everyone's attention. Everyone's been thinking more about things like AI and Web3 in the last year, AI in particular. And
Mm.
this is maybe kind of, everyone loves to turn their heads in the tech space, right? And this is another time people go, and actually maybe that metaverse AR stuff actually does have legs. So yeah, I think this is a good one to get into a little bit more.
Yeah, I think like most people off the bat as well kind of think of this as quite an offensive play. Like, they're doing lots of research, they're leading the way, they're breaking ground, all this kind of stuff. But I think there's a lot of to be said for the defensive play for Meta. And if we cast our minds like even further back, like Facebook, when they were just like a web platform, right? They were the website probably that everyone was using on their computer. And then they had this whole move where they wanted to move to mobile apps. And this was a big risk factor. They didn't know that it could be done. It was a complete game changer. They didn't know if it had the same USP for that. And they obviously succeeded. Here we are today. It's one of the most popular, mobile apps ever. And I think it became the most valuable mobile app at the time, mostly because ads are so much more effective on phones. Like it dominates so much more of the screen. They get more data. There's obviously lots more traffic. It's far more addictive. You can't be taking your PC everywhere with you, but you can be scrolling on your phone and Facebook, wherever you're going and talking to people constantly. And then something really catastrophic happened in Facebook's mind. Apple enabled this tracking switch off. Do you remember that? Like it was this new
Yeah.
setting that they basically had where it was like you got the notification and basically saying, do you want to switch off your tracking? And it was like a massive button saying, yes, you do. And then a tiny little button saying, no, I don't. And basically, I would say that overnight, Facebook lost like 60% or something crazy, like a big number like that of their market cap because this was their whole like business proposition, right? Being able to track link ads and recommend products and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the good news for Meta is, or Facebook, is it's all back now. But I think this is kind of like part of the internal zeitgeist of Meta and Mark Zuckerberg now, is they have this kind of fear of being completely dependent on the tech, on the interface to the person. And this is kind of why he's looking for the next thing, which he thinks is wearables. And like we're going to talk about today, these like new smart glasses, because he doesn't want to be beholden to the Apple, the Samsungs of the world, because, they can just switch things off overnight and completely ruin his business model.
Yeah, it's interesting because it touches upon like different aspects of both Web 2 and Web 3 that we've talked about at length on the pod before, right? So as you said, like the this history of Facebook and now Meta was it became, super popular as you said, and then they had to find a way to monetize, to make revenue, and they were one of the big harbingers of, the Web 2 business model, ads based, our data being effectively commoditized on our behalf without our explicit consent, whether or not it's in terms of service and things like that. It's something that people weren't really aware of until things like the Cambridge Analytica scandal came out. So they were making money via this very Web 2 model. And then, yeah, the thing that happened with Apple, I don't know if anyone's ever clicked allow this app to track because, why would you? And yeah, that kind of ate into their revenue lines and showed almost this idea of single point of failure as well. They became very dependent on Apple for their advertising revenue because of the market share Apple has. Obviously, there's also the Apple tax on things purchased
Mm,
through mobile apps anyway. So Apple already has almost a bit of a stranglehold on monetization for mobile first platform. So it's a story of diversification for Meta. And I think I actually was very much on board in 2021 when it first came out. I thought this does make a smart play. They were really trying to be the big first mover to put proper weight
mhm,
behind metaverse as a concept beyond, just the theory of it. And they had their R&D budget was something crazy, right? It was something like, was it like $1 billion a
mm,
year at one point? I
yeah,
think their R&D budget
something like
on
that.
on all this stuff. It's crazy. And they have been building their own hardware now, right? That's one of the big markers is they went from being almost a pure consumer facing software company. Obviously, there's some hardware stuff behind the scenes, but they weren't necessarily building their own hardware. And now, through various acquisitions and expansions and R&D, they are now producing their own hardware, which is part of what was quite interesting about the Orion announcement. So yeah, I think it makes sense from their point of view, and they were differentiated at the start, but obviously since that initial pivot to Meta, then Apple have come in and brought out the Vision Pro, a very slick consumer facing product at not a great price point for most people, but it was
Mm,
it was in the market, it was there to be tested. And when we spoke about that when it came out, they were obviously moving away quite a lot from the term metaverse, right? They didn't say that anywhere to my knowledge. They were using like spatial computing and stuff like that. So
yeah.
it's interesting that Meta is still kind of going down that route, I think.
I think, yeah, you're right. It's kind of got this maybe this gimmicky connotation where it's just a bit silly, a
Mm,
bit fun, a bit playful. And when you're like a $1 trillion business or whatever these companies are worth now, you don't really want to be playful. You want to be serious. But yeah, you're right. Some of the hardware they built, I think it was back in like 2014 when Meta acquired Oculus, and Oculus is obviously
mm,
probably the foremost of all the VR headsets that are typically used for gaming, like some social interaction. And I kind of get it from like Meta's perspective. Like there's an easy connection there. Like the whole point of Facebook was to connect people around the world. And I would kind of said that, the digital age and using things on your computer and mobile is not very human. And doing that with VR tech makes it a bit more human, a bit more real. So there's an obvious bridge there where they've got the aim of connecting to people, and then the tech that actually makes the connection more real. So that was like an obvious acquisition. And then they did the whole announcement to change to Meta in 2021, and it was really playful, really gimmicky. I think everyone remembers Mark Zuckerberg floating around with his avatar in these
yeah.
spaces, and everyone was like, "What the hell is this? Like, this isn't like a future that I necessarily want." I don't really know how that was targeted, but I think it was mostly a marketing problem. Like, the marketing didn't really make sense from my perspective, and that was obviously reflected in the stocks completely tanking. And Zuckerberg kind of said publicly he was pivoting and understood that there wasn't like a desire for this, that people didn't understand it. But like you say, he actually really didn't, because we're going to talk about two big projects they're pushing that relate to this directly. The first one is the Ray-Ban smart glasses, which I don't even know. Do you know much about these, Jack? I actually saw them the other day because they got some new specs, and everyone was like kind of fangirling around these Ray-Ban smart glasses.
Okay. Yeah, no, I when we were researching this one, this was a new thing to me. Like I had only really heard of the Orion thing. I think I'd maybe heard of the Ray-Ban collaboration a while ago, but I kind of just thought, well, I'll ignore this until it is much more mature and kind of further down the line. So yeah, if you maybe you can just talk us through what those were exactly.
Jack doesn't deal with emerging tech. He only deals with emerged tech. And you can tell I do all the research on this. No, the only reason it took all, like, I got into it is because I was literally buying glasses because I lost mine 4 weeks ago. And I was getting these massive thick specs that you can probably see on camera. And someone was like, "Oh, they're the Meta glasses." And I was like, "No." And then I saw them and they were just next to them. And it's like, they're actually not that expensive, like 200, 300 quid, which is like for glasses and everything is probably like, that's probably what you're paying for one or two pairs of glasses. And I was like, "What the hell is this? I barely heard about this." So it's a collaboration with Ray-Ban and Meta back in 2021, I think was when this project started. And FYI, like the company behind this is a company called Essilor Luxicta or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce that. I obviously butchered it. And they're like one of the biggest glasses manufacturers in the world, if not the biggest. Like a $60 billion company. They've got 200,000 employees. They're basically the biggest glasses company in the world. And actually, and as a side note, Meta is trying to invest in that company. So this is like an obvious strategic play for them where they're like, the future of wearables is smart glasses. We're going to have a partnership and potentially like an injection into this company because that is the future. We need to have some kind of hardware manufacturers in the space that will give us the advantage, the cutting edge. But these glasses, They look like maybe slightly thicker than normal wearable glasses, which most people have, but they have an integrated camera for photos, videos, built-in speaker, microphone, so you can do hand-free calls and audio and all this kind of stuff. A bit of voice assistant as well, so you can do your classic kind of hands-free Siri style stuff. And they just look like normal glasses. So like they do have to be Bluetooth connected to your phone to get a lot of the smart capabilities with Siri. So it's kind of like a traditional wearable watch, smartwatch, where you do have to be Bluetooth linked to your mobile device to get a lot of the smart functionality. But the very fact that they have kind of like cameras involved in there and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of like a James Bond movie from like the early 2000s. Like it's quite cool, cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, as I said, they did kind of pass me by as an announcement, and I'm vaguely aware of it happening. But then you go on and see it as a £300, $300 price point. It's actually very accessible, and
Mm,
that they are very minimalist. They're not putting the smart aspect too far in your face when you're actually looking at the device. So they're interesting because that, to my mind, was also reflecting Meta kind of rowing back a little bit on their ambitions, or of having these fully like the Oculus style that you described, these full VR headsets that you could use for things like gaming and stuff. But this was much more of like a soft touch approach, and going with the brand like Ray-Ban, that has all this existing brand recognition, customer base. That was clearly a much more wide generic market play. I mean, you mentioned, Luxottica, I think is the pronunciation. I think they're like the alphabet of glasses companies, right? They're the
mm,
the umbrella company that owns all the big brands that you know. So the same way
mm.
you have Alphabet behind Google and all these other ones. But yeah, so it's interesting, and I've never personally used them. I've played with some of the bigger headsets, but I've not seen in person one of these Ray-Ban glasses. But
Mm.
they look pretty good, right? Like from an aesthetic point of view, they blend in very well. You wouldn't know really unless you look closely.
Exactly. Like I saw them and I just thought they were normal glasses. It wasn't until someone like told me that they had a camera and I was like, oh, that's quite cool. I think like that's one of the neat things about this is kind of quite seamless. Like people haven't noticed that there's something special about them. And if we're being honest, like the tech isn't so advanced that it's a big step in humanity's progress, right? It's just kind of like glasses with a bit of a camera involved and some Bluetooth chip to link some smart stuff. But like that's not that impressive. It's the fact that they're seamless and they're pushing the idea of wearables into a wearable that so much of humanity and society has and is kind of so normal, like walking around with these spatial computers on your head that dominates your entire face. Like that's not normal, but everyone wears glasses. So I think it's quite a smart play on that front, even though the actual development isn't necessarily that smart. So they're kind of saying that this is for casual use, fitness, travel people. Just record, be a bit more immersed rather than having your phone out. It's just kind of recording everything. But they've got really big aims. They want to hit 100 million daily Ray-Ban interactions by 2025. Like trying to really push big on this stuff.
That's the least sexy sounding KPI I've ever heard, by the way. 100 million Ray-Ban interactions. But yeah, I think it's an interesting foray into the space, and it shows that they're very aligned with what a lot of people now are talking about. Because again, you can't forget like 2021 when I think these were first announced, right? As a wearable technology that would potentially integrate AI aspects in the future. Now everyone's talking with the rise of ChatGPT and all these other LLMs and various multimodal languages things. Everyone is talking about wearable technology as the best interface for these generative AI models, right? We spoke to Colin previously on the show. He was talking about glasses and wearables generally, but more specifically glasses, he thinks, and I think a lot of people think will be one of the main interfaces to interact with AI models in the future instead of just using a laptop, how most of us are doing now, or on the mobile app. People see wearables like glasses as the way to the future, and that the phone, obviously, it has ridiculous market dominance right now and is the predominant way we interact with everything online. But there's a lot of people predicting that this wearables market is just going to completely explode. It's going to be the main way we interact with lots of these new emerging technologies in the future. And yeah, it shows Facebook, Meta were kind of ahead of the curve on this, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it makes sense, right? One of the numbers I've seen is that the wearables market is going to be roughly around 300 billion by 2030. So it's big, big numbers. And I think it just feels much more human. Like I know we've kind of normalized it in society, but the idea of holding this device and recording so much of life is quite inhuman and a bit sad sometimes. I know I do it, but when you go to a concert or you're at a birthday
Mm.
party or something like that, and everyone's just holding the phone, all you see is flashes and all this kind of stuff. Like this isn't necessarily going to remove that. People will just have these glasses and it'll be auto recording everything, but it might make it feel a bit more human. You can be maybe a bit more immersed. Obviously, there's been lots of people saying, what are the privacy concerns around this stuff? Everyone's recording their entire life. Like, where's that data going? Do I trust Meta? I mean, not many people do trust Meta, but you sign off to a lot of this stuff with your Samsung or your Apple device. Meta's probably just going to be maybe one of the new smart devices where you just default sign things off, and hopefully there'll be some privacy preservation. But I do really think that wearable tech, especially glasses, is going to be an absolute game changer. A lot of people are pushing into that space.
Yeah, I mean, even while you're talking, I can think of some kind of ways where I would actually genuinely use this in real life. Like if I'm watching a football game or something and I want to capture a bit of what's happening, maybe a friend's playing and I want to capture a goal. Normally, you'd have to stand there with your phone out for the full
Mm,
90 minutes and in the hope that something's going to happen. Whereas it's much less invasive to just have it sitting on your face already. No one's going to ask anything about that. It's already kind of integrated and baked in. It's not something that's drawing too much attention to you, I think, which is smart because that's what people want, right? People don't want to have an experience that is all about, this is emerging technology, use it for emerging technology's sake. Like some of the early AI agent type wearables we've seen that, they're kind of all about, oh, well, this is because it's an AI thing, but actually this is a very much more simple. And I'm mentioning AI because we're going to get onto Orion in a minute, but they paired all that back as well
mm.
the Ray-Ban stuff, right? It was more about image capture. It was more about just augmenting the basic experience with some additional things. So yeah, that's kind of, I think, a good summary of what was there before. And why are we talking about it now? Well, it's all about Orion, right? This is the very new, exciting thing that we wanted to cover. So what on earth are these glasses? Because I know you know more about this than me, Alec. You've been in the market for glasses, so what's your take on them?
I have, and again, they don't look too different from normal glasses, but these are kind of like a beefed up version of the Ray-Ban glasses. They're called the Orion glasses, and Mark Zuckerberg did an announcement, I think it was early October, on this, and they're kind of like the one-liner is they're the new AI-powered mixed reality device for immersive experiences. So the point is, it's want to blend physical and digital worlds. So let's talk about it. First of all, it's only in prototypes, so these aren't buyable now. Like they just developed, I think, 30 prototypes of this tech, just testing it out, seeing how it feels. I think the goal is to release these in like 2027. So like they've got the tech, they've proved it. Now it's to try and make it cheaply. I think right now they're costing like 10 grand a pop to make or something like that, which is a lot, right? That's just a make. It's not even with profit. And they now want to work out, can they mass produce these at much lower costs, which is something that, Meta's not really in the space of again. So this is a whole other issue. Like it's a cool, sexy tech, and I'll talk about some of the features and some of the use cases later. But they're not used to like building these things to like the scale of Apple, the scale of Samsung. So it's a big question whether they can do this cheaply and affordably. But that's the business stuff. We're here to talk about the sexy, exciting tech stuff. So you got the glasses. They kind of look like beefed up, chunky version of normal glasses, but not so ridiculous that they make you look uncool. You've also got this Bluetooth disc, which is kind of like a separate to that, which is where the compute is. That's where all like the kind of the computational power is. So you don't need a phone. You kind of have this Bluetooth compute disc. And then the final component is they have this like neuro wristband type thing, which tracks your hand gestures and how you're doing things. So, the goal here is to have a true augmented reality kind of device that sits on your face. You've got real-time navigation, notifications. It's like a transparent glasses, so normal glasses basically, but they can display images over the top, and you can use voice gestures, hand gestures to control it. Honestly, this is where I got really excited. So I was like, this is so futuristic. The idea of just walking around and being able to overlay information using these AI powered agents or whatever we want to call it. It's like being a kid.
Yeah, it's very impressive, and as you said, like the fact that it is three distinct components right now that they've brought it out as a demo is interesting because it's still back on that idea. I think they're really, in my view, they're really trying to push away from the mobile phone being the interface because normally that you just use the mobile phone for the compute, the Bluetooth connected compute, and for the input to the glasses, right? But instead, they've replaced the input side with this wristband where you have all these gestures that are kind of linked to things you can do on the actual glasses as the interface, right? So you actually the place where you're actually seeing things happen. So yeah, it's super interesting that they're going for the opposite of mobile first design here. They're going for like removing the mobile phone, which is will play interestingly with the fact that so much of their money in the past has come from that, as we discussed.
Hmm.
And I'm also, as you said, the cost to manufacture these as prototypes, as almost this is almost like a concept car, right? Like the Bugatti Veyron. They're not really there for mass market consumption. They're just to say, like, look what we can do. Look where our R&D budget's going, costing like 10 grand to manufacture these. But again, it's showing how that I feel like they're almost going down what Apple has done in the past with becoming a vertically integrated company, where now they're building their whole tech stack in one place. I think I read that these glasses or one of the components is going to be running with its own proprietary hardware, its own chips as well.
Hmm.
Whether it's like partly using a third party, I don't know. But we saw Apple started to decouple from other companies with its own chipset 3 or 4 years ago now. So yeah, it's showing that broader, again, as we said, trying to remove their own single points of failure as a company to provide this experience is super interesting. But the actual glasses themselves, I mean, I haven't, obviously I haven't used them because at the minute it's just the tech reporters and stuff getting it. But if you watch any of the videos and the coverage it's had so far, it's very impressive. It looks, to me, it looks similar to the Vision Pro experience, but very pared down. So it's kind of, you
Yeah.
have these almost widget type interface elements that you see through the glasses, but you also have the existing real world background. So it is this augmented reality, almost like a Pokemon Go style thing, but much more mature than that kind of stuff was, right?
Yeah, I want to highlight that. It's like quite an important distinction. Maybe the features don't actually matter that much, but like it's something that they're
Mm,
really pushing is that the Vision Pro is VR. So it's like you're not seeing through the glasses ever. Like it is a screen in front of your face and it has cameras on the top. So if you want to
mm,
see in front of your face, those cameras will just project what's on in front of you onto that screen in front of your face. And what they're pushing with this is this kind of this idea of AR, which is a transparent glass. You are actually seeing through the glass, and then you will have something overlaid on top of it. So I think like a cool example is, imagine like Halo style. You have like an avatar that's in the top right corner saying things like, "Oh, you got to turn left here," or like arrows as you're navigating around on Google Maps and you need to turn left, take the second right, go further down. There's the shop, that kind of thing. So they are really pushing the idea of like reality is important, blah blah blah. But we want to have overlays to kind of enhance the experience of humanity. So there's the two pieces: the metaverse piece, which is like the kind of the tech we just talked about, these AR glasses, and then obviously the big fat AI piece that's only been allowed in like the last 2-3 years, where we can start to like translate and digest all of the mass amounts of data we're seeing in front of us and actually do something practical and real time with it, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that distinction, because that is probably one of the bits that caught my eye the most as well. Is when the Vision Pro came out, I was almost a little bit unnerved by that whole idea of them simulating like what something that is perceptively meant to be as close to your actual environment as possible, but in the background, it isn't. It's being fed in by these cameras, right? So that was a little bit spooky to me, and I do like the fact that these new Orion glasses are trying to retain as much of the actual real experience and just augment it with the little things you can say. And you mentioned things like driving and stuff. I think that's a really nice use case, because that's one where you can see, a small heads up display. We're all used to that in gaming, right? You're looking in the direction you're traveling, instead of having to look down at your phone in a holder or at the kind of dashboard for navigation. I think that's like a really simple use case where you can see, yeah, that actually could have a lot of benefit for someone who really wants to be looking at the road but still get directions.
We could imagine like if it's ever becomes so affordable that you could make the entire like windscreen on the front like a whole VR
Mm,
glass that's doing everything. But then it kind of gets into the realm of like, how safe is that? Like if my sat nav or phone stops doing its job, I can still drive normally. If all of a sudden the entire windscreen turns red and I can't see through it, or it's like I'm so overwhelmed with ads, which isn't like impossible to imagine with Meta. They're going to put ads everywhere that I can't concentrate on the road. Like that gets dangerous. And then there's all the privacy stuff, like how much data, like obviously what you're imagining is that, similar to Siri, things are constantly listening. There's trigger things that kind of actually activate it to do something. And if you're constantly streaming all that data to an AI agent, where's that data going? But yeah, I am overall hopeful about this. It really excites me. I think one of the use cases they demoed was he had these glasses on and he's looking at loads of ingredients on the kitchen table, and
mm,
then based on those ingredients, it gives you an overlay of a recipe on what you can make. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm the worst cook in the world. It'd be so cool to be told that what to do based on what's actually happening in front of me. Another one they talked about was playing piano. You have the piano in front of you. I want to play Mozart, highlight the keys I need to play. Like that kind of stuff is so much fun. It's like bringing games or like all the stuff that we've been developing in the Oculus is to the real world, which just makes it so much more intuitive and engaging, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think there are so many, basically all the use cases you could think of, or most of the use cases for when we talked about the Vision Pro, I think actually will apply here. It seems a lot more appealing to me, the idea of being able to just take the glasses off. I know at the minute with the demo version, you have the two other pieces of hardware, and I will imagine in the future that will be pared down to be totally minimalistic in the future. Right? I think
Mm,
when it comes to the mass consumer market, it'll be very seamless. But even the idea of just being able to pop the glasses off to end the experience, I think is so much less friction than you have currently with the big headsets, that I think that will appeal to a lot more people. You don't feel like you're getting lost in something else, right? So yeah, I think there's lots of legs in this. I'm just intrigued to see, how can they get those costs down? How long will it take to get those costs
mm,
down? Because I do think they're obviously going to bring a consumer version of this to market at some point. The market for wearable tech is one of the biggest kind of bullish areas people have right now. People expect it to grow hugely. I'm just intrigued to see, will this be a 2 or 3 year thing? You'd think
mm.
maybe, given that they've announced it now, but will we be buying them in 5 or 10 years? Maybe is more likely in my head.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in a bit more detail. There's also like the usability aspect as well. Like, will it replace computing? Like, we're so used to using keyboards, it's just like kind of a defined way of interacting with the PC and like writing all this kind of stuff. Sure, chatbots are getting more and more intuitive, they're getting better, performing better. But like the amount of issues I have with Siri, like this thing is not going to have a native keyboard, right? That's why they have the little wristband so you can do the hand gestures. And they imagine most of it will be voice command. But Siri still gives me hell. But in 3 years' time, surely these like the Siri equivalent is going to be super smart, like as smart as ChatGPT, and be able to carry out those things. It's going to be really interesting to see the learning curve of that transition. Just going from a keyboard style space to everything voice command. Like in so much of intelligence and knowledge is voice and language based. I think that's much more intuitive, and it will, I think, be very beneficial to push towards that. But yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. My only concern about this that I have as a reservation is when everything is audible, then what the privacy implications. I'm the kind of person who doesn't like using Duolingo on the tube, for example, right? I don't like speaking out loud, attracting attention to myself. So I think that will be something they might have to solve with the kind of neural input side of things. But that's a whole
Oh
other
God.
kettle of worms.
You're
So
like
let's
straight to
not get into
neural
that.
implant. That's the cell, straight to neural implant. God. I've seen people do these what are they called? Like low whisper voice style things where you make the
Mm.
sounds. I think that might be from a sci-fi film and not reality. But yeah, I've seen some things around that. If you're listening, Mark, that's the way to go. And the big thing, yeah, is the cost. Can they bring it down? Like they've obviously acquired like companies like Oculus, so they're starting to get into the realm of actually mass producing these things. But for them to compete with like the Apples of the world and the Samsungs of the world and really get costs down, it's kind of a new kettle of fish for them. And I was saying it's 10K right now to produce 30. Are they going to be able to hit the market with millions? Is it going to, if it's really going to replace phones, then it's going to be billions. Like, can they do that? Can they do that well? That's the big question. And, that will be, will it replace the Vision? That's 3K right now, which I think is way overpriced to hit that main market, but it could do, and that's quite exciting. They've got 3 years to do this, which is a long time to be fair in this space.
Yeah, and obviously that's what they're always trying to do, right? Is drive down that bottom line. But yeah, it's always worth remembering though. Everything is at least kind of exponential, right? When we're talking about these technologies, I saw some images that don't know if you've seen these, of early prototypes from like 2020, 2021, when they were starting to work on wearables and glasses, and there was one with like a guy wearing a backpack to make it work, right? So we've come already from that. It was a backpack and a huge headset where you couldn't see kind of above the nose of the person. So it's already gone from that into something super condensed. So yeah, I wouldn't, it wouldn't surprise me if they do get that. I'm pretty sure they will get there. It's just a case of, you know, A, how long, and then B, will people actually buy it at the end of the day? But yeah, I'm hopeful.
Same, and I think like the sky really is the limit when you think of use cases. Like even just like surgeons, for example, imagine just popping on some glasses and you've got an overlay of the patient, the incision point, what the 3D model looks like underneath, what you should be doing, heart rate, all this kind of stuff. It's kind of really gamifying or taking a lot of concepts from games like intuitive displays and all this kind of stuff and taking it into the real world where it can actually be more useful. But yeah, it's an incredibly exciting space. I think that there's going to be more and more announcements from more and more companies in the similar space. Because as soon as one's kind of proved the technology and proved there's a market, people kind of, it's like self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, where people are kind of expecting that this is the future and waiting for the technologies to actually hit that. So we're going to probably see more from Apple, more from Samsung, all these places. But yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too. I'm kind of excited in a way that the metaverse dream hasn't quite died yet, because this seems to have almost been happening in stealth mode. I'm sure people who are looking closer will have expected this stuff to come. People looking at what they're patenting and stuff is always a good way of checking. But yeah, from my perspective, I thought they really were pivoting away, and this seems to be less of a pivot away and more of a kind of refocusing on where they think the actual consumer value is going to be. And I think that that's a really positive sign. So yeah, fingers crossed we'll have these in our hands or on our faces very soon. And yeah, we can review one day. We always have committed to doing one of these episodes in a virtual reality at some point. So we'll have to come good on that.
Yeah, it'd be really cool to test out one of the 30 prototypes they have for the Orion right now. But I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but let's see.
Yeah, my rule for when we do that is that we have to design each other's avatars, right? So we have to turn up in what each of us has done for the other. I think that'd be funny.
Yeah, but I guess watch the space. Like it's going to move really quickly, and we'll keep trying to do announcements when the upgrades and new things are coming out. But yeah, thank you for listening, wherever you may be, and join us next time to untangle a little more of Web3. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Untangling Web3.
Don't forget to send us your thoughts, questions, and comments on social media, and be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast provider to catch the next episode. See you next time to untangle a little bit more of Web3.
The views we express here are our own and do not reflect the views of our employers.